That's when we lose connections, you see. Lose control.
Better than a loose cannon.
During the American Civil War, just before it started, there was a connection lost between the North and the South. And the control of the federal government was sort of lost as a result of that. And it caused Abraham Lincoln to quote from Mark chapter 3, when he said that a house divided against itself cannot stand. There was no control over the two sides in the conflict. Mark chapter 3 says the same thing. But it talks about Christ saying it because at the time, when he was casting out demons, he was accused of being the devil. And the context was that would the devil cast out demons and therefore be a house divided amongst itself? Because such a house cannot stand. Paul talked about the same thing roughly when he talked about the church being one body in unity. That every person is a member of that body. And as a whole, we create and become the body of Christ. But the individual members, like the individual members of the body, are really not very effective. There's really no control. There's really no continuity or connectiveness between the members if they're not in unity. We can see that in modern times, in modern medicine, because of a disease called dementia. In dementia, the brain loses its connectivities, its proper connections, both within itself and towards the body in general. So, the body loses its abilities to function, to walk, to control its bodily functions, to eat, to think. If you've ever had someone with dementia in your family, you know what a terrible disease it is. But it's all because the control of the brain over the body is lost. It's a matter of control. During the last number of months, there have been some bad situations in the States, in Texas and in Las Vegas. There have been some in Canada as well, but not nearly as bad. There are wars all over the world. And it makes you wonder, when you see this, there is some kind of mental derangement going on. In fact, the disasters in Las Vegas and Texas have been suggested they were caused by people with mental illness. Just as the body is not controlled and the brain doesn't function, is it possible that the brain doesn't function when it doesn't have the control of God? Is it what's we could call spiritual dementia? Because we are supposed to be under the control of a supreme being. And without that control, the brain can do all sorts of funny things, which can lead to all sorts of difficult problems. In Daniel chapter 5, it talks about Nebuchadnezzar. And it says, O thou king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar thy father the kingdom, and greatness, and glory, and majesty. And because of the greatness that he gave him, all the peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him, whom he would slay, whom he would keep alive, whom he would be raised up, and whom he would put down. But when his heart was lifted up, and his spirit was hardened, so that he dealt proudly. He was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. And he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beasts, and his dwelling was with the wild asses. He was fed with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven. Does that sound like a mental illness? Because he lost the connectivity with God. He talks about his son Belshazzar, who had also not humbled his heart, although he knew everything that happened to Nebuchadnezzar. And it says that thou hast praised the gods of silver and gold, of brass, of iron, of wood and stone, which do not see, do not hear, or do not know. And the God in whose hand thy breath is, and whose are all thy ways, has not been glorified. The NLT translation puts it this way: but you have not honored the God who gives you the breath of life and controls your destiny. Control. The North and South was not under the control of the government in Abraham Lincoln's time. In dementia, the body's not under the control of the brain. And in what you could call spiritual dementia, the brain is not under control of God. We saw what happened to Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar. Perhaps if we had less spiritual dementia, we would have less problems and wars and disasters around the world.
Amen.
Maybe it's something we should all think about.